Okay, this is part 3 of the tutorial on drawing key art. Um, this one we will try to finish up on the drawing side of it at least, and then we'll see if we can actually get to do some value studies as well. Over here I've got the knee. I'm gonna make I'm going to assume that this person's wearing boots, and the boots are going to be tied with straps around the shin. Sort of like a ninja, I guess. And then this area here is a little bit baggier, right? Bit more loose fitting, and not sure, maybe there should be a little bit of armor or something like that. Let's check out some of these reference images, see what might be kind of cool. I don't really have a whole lot of information here, over here on Legolas it looks like his vest area, or whatever this part is, actually has a bit of a flap. And there's definitely a belt, so a belt would be good. So, an indication of a belt. Usually you want to indicate these things with some curvature to it, so that it actually looks like it has three-dimensional qualities to it. And the trick there is knowing, am I looking up at it, or am I looking down on it? Or is it coming towards me, or is it going away from me? And then knowing that those qualities will inform you as to which direction does the curve does it favor, right? A lot of times on pants there will also be a seam of some sort that would go down here. So I'm going to draw in a bit of a seam right there, just so that it just feels like fabric. And I don't really have any like knee or armor yet. I don't know, I guess I'm keeping it all pretty tight, close to the chest area here. Right, cool. I'm actually liking this quite a bit. Now, I did not commit to the eyes, and the reason why is because I usually like creating the pupils of the eyes on a separate layer, and I'll show you why. Because with that, if you've got pupils that are, I don't know, a little bit offset in the wrong way, you can at least, or if she doesn't look like looking at you, and maybe he's a bit cross-eyed, well, then you can actually scoot it over a little bit. Now I just selected this this pupil here with the lasso tool, and then if you go to the move tool here, you can actually use the arrow keys, and let me hide so that I'm not distracted by the little ants selecting the thing. So control H, that hides it, and then now I can just scoot this eye over. You can make it a little bit more wall-eyed, or going towards the center here, and a little bit more cross-eyed, right? I'm not sure. Is it looking higher up? Well, first off, I just wanted to make sure that the eyes are pointed in the right direction. And then secondly, whoop, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, secondly, now I will deselect, Control D, and now with the arrow keys, I can actually move stuff around. You could see how I can make this character look like they're looking off to the side, off to the left. See, now I've got some choices. Yeah, I don't know. Looking up. Should probably be actually looking down a little bit, now that I think about it. Something, I don't know, looking at the audience is kind of cool too. Yeah, around there is fine. So now that I've got that determined, put in the highlights on the eyes. It's usually a dot for where that pupil is. So, and then there's usually a shadow on the top here. And this is like kind of from looking at a whole lot of comic books. That's generally how I render out eyeballs. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of fun. Sure. Commit. I'm going to merge down. Let's see, preserve. And let's see if there's anything else here that I'd like. Like a little bit of thickness to whatever bands are going across those characters. You know, if there's leather strapping or something like that. I haven't quite defined what the costume is, and maybe you can get away with a little bit of that until, you know, until you're asked to do a second angle on this character. Then you're gonna have to figure it out for sure. But until then, because the hand or the hand and this arm covers up quite a bit, you can get away with a lot actually. Right there. Cool. Liking it. Is there anything else? The line work is actually a bit rough, but got most of the ideas down. If I was going to be doing this professionally, I would probably go through a whole other pass on the line work to really clean it up. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to continue on. Let me indicate some of this background right here. I've got a branch out here. And actually, again, you gotta look up the reference, right? Oh, man. It's always looking up more reference, this guy. Alright, so we need to look up what the trees look like. Elm trees, maybe? I don't know. Sounds good, but okay. That's like elm. Let's see. What about, like, what kind of trees would there be in a forest, right? This is just a whole lot of detail. It's just way too much noise. This looks a little better. Come on. That looks pretty good. I don't mind that as much. That looks pretty cool. Alright. So this is like the main trunk right here on the right hand side. And Well, I really shouldn't be doing this yet, but I'm just going to indicate for now, sort of, there's going to be a little bit of texturing with the, the bark on this tree. Kind of like this. And you don't want it to overwhelm the line work. This is detail, so the detail should stay thin and not overwhelm the line work of the character, right? The character should actually have the thickest lines around them. So, just as a reminder, I'm just going to enlarge the size of this brush a little bit. I'm going to just make sure that my silhouette read of this character is better defined so that this character really pops out from the background, including all these arrow quivers as well. And this is also where some of that comic book coloring tutorial will come in handy. You want to make sure that all your lines get closed off at this point. If you start off with thin lines, you can always thicken the lines. But if you start off with thick lines, well, it's going to be a lot harder to make them thinner. So this hand being in front should actually have a thicker form line around it. Oh yeah, and this part's really messy. Let me clean this up a bit. And all I'm doing is using the lasso tool here and just selecting bits and deleting, hitting the delete. I guess I could go in and erase, but this is like the nuclear option where you just select it, delete it. You know that there will be nothing inside there, because sometimes when you erase there, you still leave some residue, and that doesn't make for a nice clean selection for later. So here we go, and I kind of like all this. Definitely this arrow is gonna have a thicker, oh actually all this stuff right here, let me just merge it down. We're committing. Ooh, it's scary when you do that, but yeah, I'm committing to this arrow now, even though I really wasn't sure before, but at this point in time it's time to be sure. Ooh, I really don't like this part right here though. See how the line of the hand goes right into the tip of that part going out? That's no good. That's a tangency, right? So we've got to fix this. And not entirely sure how, but it just has to either overlap or one line has to overlap the other. That's usually the rule. So I can either make it so that it's touching none of it, right? It's so hard to avoid tangencies. They just happen, and man, it's just a bad visual illusion that occurs, and it just ruins the illusion of depth of your image, because quite frankly it is an illusion, right? There is no depth to this image. It's a two-dimensional plane. I'm trying to make it look three-dimensional. I'm trying to convince the viewer that one thing is in front of another, even though it's not. It's actually all two-dimensional. So this is what we are contending with, and This is what illustrators and artists have found to kind of help create the illusion of the years is get rid of tangencies, create atmosphere. In this case, with line work, how do you create atmosphere with line work? There's no value, there's no tone. I haven't even applied any tone, but how do I create atmosphere with it? Well, you create it with line thickness, right? So these, again, I'm keeping my tree stuff off in the background here. I don't want these lines. See, the mistake would be if there was a big gash of a line like that. You want to keep this stuff in the background. It's almost like less important, like don't look here, look at the character, right? So that's the idea that we're trying to portray with these thin lines. Same thing here. Again, be careful with tangencies as you get two things that are on different planes converge and they look like they're going to touch one another. Here I'm just going to redraw, and this is more of an indication versus, I'll probably end up painting this more at the end. It's probably easier. Ooh, so okay, see this branch right here? You do not want this branch to do this. That would suck because, again, tangency, right? So you actually want the branch to be like outside of that so that those lines do not touch. So tricky, but it's true. Okay. See the overlap? That's a good thing. The overlap of this arm, that arm overlaps. And then there's some foliage. I don't even know what the shape of the leaves are. I'm just gonna keep this as a silhouette for now. And even this part here, ugh, you run the danger of tangencies all over the place here. Alright. Right here. Coming out of there and ends up here or something like that. Okay, and then something like that. Alright, that's decent. So now I'm just going to put this full white. You can see sort of how I've laid this out before, after, right? A lot more detail happening now. Let me hit on the white layer here, hit Control U and just lower the value here on the lightness so that I start off with a medium gray. Yay, start off with the medium gray. My character's on a separate layer, so the first thing is I want this character to pop out. Remember from the comic book lessons, the comic book coloring lessons, you select the outside of this character like this, and then you hit, oh wait, there's this part too, there's a little gap right there, and then you hit Control Shift I, and that inverse selects, and then on a layer underneath it, I'm going to create a new layer underneath it. I'm just gonna fill it in with I don't know, like a darker gray. I'm gonna fill it in, and that's just temporarily. We could lighten this a little bit. Doesn't have to be that dark, but at least now we've got some distinction between the character and the background plate. I'm gonna grab these two layers with the line work and the shape of the character, and I'm gonna hit Control G, and I'm just gonna name this group Archer. Cool. And now I've got the background to contend with, so this background, I'm just going to make a new layer, and again I've got to find a value that is similar to this but slightly lighter. So I'm going to pick one that's one step lighter, like that. Okay, and this time I'm just going to paint it in. Boop, boop, boop. And foliage as well. I'm just going to paint through and behind this character. Now, because I put in a, the dark gray color, like basically the silhouette behind that line work of that character, when I paint through and behind, it's not seeing through it, it's completely opaque, so again, I'm not going to be affecting it as much, and that allows me the freedom of painting behind this character, knowing that I'm not going to mess up. So I'm gonna put this down here. Oh, I made one mistake here. See this part? Boom. Select that out, delete. Now I'm just going to go back and paint this. Branch in. Paint these streaks out. Come on. Let's finish this up. Cool. Like that. And now we can lighten up this background plate a little bit more. Yeah. And now we can, again, we just play around with these values a little bit more. I'm gonna darken this character a little bit more. Something like that. You could see how, you got foreground, middle ground, background, right? Cool. So this layer with the tree and everything, we can just select that and the line work together and hit Control G, and we call this like tree. So that's the tree layer, and then this is whatever's in the back, like so. And now we want to figure out what the lighting is on this character. I'm going to use a clipping mask so that my line work stays up on top, and I'm going to create new layers on there, and I can just paint in lighting, right, if I wanted to. Let me see. Well, first off, what I'm going to want to do is I want to define the lights and the shadows. So I'm thinking the lighting comes from above, even though this character's mostly in the shadow. I'm just going to choose like a darker value here, and instead of the paint bucket tool with like I'm just going to use the gradient tool now, and I'm just going to gradiate down. basically I'm defining, you know, where I want my shadows to be. And this is really helpful, especially for bringing out this bow from the background, right? If the bow is brighter than the background, then now I can see the bow a whole lot more. See that? Ah, now my eyes are starting to, and even this stuff back here, like this neck area and this hand area here. I'm just gonna start this off. Maybe not crazy dark. You don't want high contrast on the face. Not yet. But again, this is so that this hand pops out from the background. I'm just going to gradiate out. There. See? And now I want this arrow here to pop out from the hand. And so going to select out parts of this hand, like this part, and this is gonna not be as dark, right? This is just gonna be a little bit darker. But not crazy. I'm gonna hide. I'm just gonna swipe once, twice. That's pretty cool. You can come back here and erase. And remember where I did the line work here around the shadow shapes? Yeah. Now's my chance to make good on the promise of the shadows of the fingers and the knuckles. And I'm going to use this gradient tool, swipe, hide, something like that. And then this part going downward, right? Going away from us and down the knuckle where it turns the form. I'm just gonna swipe it, make it dark. Basically, at that point, it's almost like a box, right? So this part here is gonna have like a nice hard edge because it's, yeah, there's like a change up in the plane. So just gonna swipe once there. Yeah, kind of should have done this all the way through. I'm just gonna use the smudge tool and see if I can smudge it out, but if I can't, I made a selection first. That way I stay within the lines. There. Smudged it up. What happened there? That was weird. Do you see that? That was weird. Alright. In that case, I'm just gonna paint in gray. Something buggy happened in Photoshop. In the new Photoshop, there's parts where it can get really buggy, and I don't like it. Here, this part, just to speed things along a little bit, I'm just gonna paint it in. I'm just gonna paint in where my shadows are gonna be. Like so. The shadows up here are going to be a bit more fair, so I'm just gonna, meaning, you know, less contrasty. Same thing with the nose area here. Usually a little bit of a shadow underneath the brow and a little bit underneath. These are like the bags under the eyes. You don't want to emphasize those too much, especially if you want your character to look and feel young. So after you do that, you kind of want to erase back away from it, just so that it's subtly there and not like a big emphasis. So under the lip, there's usually a shadow as well. And then there's usually a little bit of a cast shadow from the upper lip to the bottom lip, as well as to the teeth. And then also a cast shadow underneath the nose. This brow here is a little bit, I don't know, furrowed slightly. There's a temple area. Usually there's like a plane change here between the temple. And we could soften all this later. Like I can go back with a soft brush and just kind of soften that out. But when you first put it in there, you kind of want to paint it kind of more defined. Because, yeah, same thing with like the thinner lines can go and become thicker lines, but and hard lines can become soft lines very easily. So, I don't know. I usually like to go that way. You don't want to make everything soft, because then the character just looks like they're made out of mashed potato or something. You know, it's just got no form to it whatsoever. So I'm just going to start erasing away where I have some plane changes here. But you don't want to do it for areas with cast shadow. So like, for example, this nose area, that's a cast shadow. But these, where it curves around here, that's the form shadow, so that you can soften. So tricky. Something like that. Might have made this hand way too dark. Gonna soften this back up a little bit. Okay, so defining the planes. See how this sticks out a little bit more? I wanted it to stick out more. So it's going to have a cast shadow. Like that. And then here. This is a great example. So the shoulder muscle is kind of like a ball, right? So I'm gonna start off with a hard brush. See here, I'm gonna start off here with a hard brush, like so. And now I'm gonna go in with a soft brush and just soften where the shadows are, but then over here I'm going to keep as a hard, see right there, I'm going to keep that as a harder edge. We can soften the end of it so it kind of blends back, but you kind of want areas where you don't always lose the form completely. And even here you've got areas where, hey, I want to render out some of this fur right now. Do that. Got my mask and then little fur bits right there. And let's see here. The pants. Actually, all this stuff. It's cast shadows, cast shadows. Right. Yeah, this area would be in shadow too. There, that's good. This area should kind of blend into one another. Just gonna smudge it a little bit. Cool. Just gonna smudge this edge. You can use the smudge tool if you wanted to for the soften thing, or you can also do the eraser tool with the soft eraser as well. So it's up to you. I prefer the eraser because the eraser is a lot faster. That smudge tool sometimes just takes forever to actually do its thing. In other programs, the smudge tool is so much better, but for some reason it's slow in Photoshop. It's however they programmed it, I guess. But it's never been fast in Photoshop. Even with really high-end, powerful computers, I've never seen it go very fast. I'm just painting in values. And this is, yeah, I mean, this is all about the form lessons we had early on like, this is basically a cylinder, and then we've got some straps on there that'll have some cast shadows that kind of wrap around it as well. But they're all kind of based off of the same ideas. Right here, I'm gonna try to figure out where the shadow might be for this arrow. I don't know, something like that. I might be wrong, but a little bit of this, a little bit of cast shadow there. So I put in the shadow layer. I can soften some of this. Erasing back away. Same thing here. But the cast shadow I want hard, but this stuff I want kind of soft. I'll need this part to be soft too. Kind of gradient from one to another. I'm using the smudge tool because I already laid down the value. Okay, this leg needs a cast shadow over the top of it because all this stuff is covering it, right? So I'm just going to select this whole area like so, and I'm going to use a dark value and use a gradient tool, hide, something like that. That's good. Cool. And then I need some highlights as well. So I'm going to do my highlights on a separate layer from the shadows. I'm going to create a new layer now. And when you create a new layer and you're already in a layer that's a clipping mask, you will create the new layer as a clipping mask, which is cool. Kind of saves you a step. So I'm going to pick this value, and I'm going to go a little bit lighter. Go a little bit lighter with it. And this part I always know. There's usually a highlight on the tip of the nose, and then that's followed up by that. There's a highlight usually over here, and then there's one on the lip because the lip is wet. Something like that. Maybe a little bit on the chin. And if the light's coming in from the top right, there's maybe this person's a little sweaty. I don't know. There's usually a little bit of a highlight there as well. knuckles. And then there's a bevel here, so I'm going to do a bevel highlight on there. Again, more prominent as we get closer to the center. Don't really want your eye looking too far into the right side. Here's where I can put in highlights and shadows as well. This part on this muscle, glistening muscle. Let's see here. This is probably a nice shiny metal bit too. And we might have to go back and do this again with a lighter value. But this is the start of where we're determining where our highlights are. Just do it in layers, one layer at a time. Here's some highlights in the hair, because hair can be rather oily. So oily means it can look a little bit wet too. And this is actually where you, as an artist, this is like almost a cool abstract shape. So you can put in a little bit of your artistic signature in here as to like how you like to render out the highlights of hair, you know. It could be so many different shapes. Just got to make sure that you have it mostly there. If there's a furrow in the brow there might actually be a highlight next to it. Let's see, there might be a little bit something here on the chin. Oh, okay, this part on here is definitely, especially if this is metal, there's definitely gonna be highlights here. So and then there's gonna be a cast shadow here, but then there's gonna be highlights after that. Here, like so. A little bit on the fingers here. A little bit on the edge of the, what do you call it, the seam. Yeah, the question is it coming towards us or away from us? That's the question. The edge here. Might get a little bit of a gradient highlight, like so. Let me show you. Just gonna select here and do a gradient going from the right, top down, kind of like that. See, defining form through the value. See, how many minutes am I in on this one? Let's see here, 44 minutes. I should probably stop this video now. When we continue, I will continue rendering out some of the gray value here. Thank you.